Have you ever felt the world crumbled around you while your heart refuses to believe it? This is the story of Oyomi and Ivie, a love tested by fate, fire, and secrets no one could imagine. Before we dive in, do well to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Oyomi and Ivie lived in Enkay, a quiet town beside a windy river. Oyomi loved Ivie with all his heart. He had sacrificed much for her happiness. Time, comfort, pride, but his devotion felt natural to him. He never imagined that life could suddenly twist in ways beyond his control. One scorching afternoon, Oyomi was away helping a neighbor when tragedy struck. Without warning, their modest home with weathered cement walls and a rusty roof erupted in flames. Smoke twisted into the sky like dark fingers clawing at the sun. Neighbors screamed, frantically trying to douse the fire, but the blaze was merciless. Oyomi ran towards the blazing house, heart pounding, shouting her name, Ivie, Ivie, but the flames roared louder than his voice. Hands pulled him back. It's too late. She's gone, they cried. His chest tightened, disbelief clawing at him. He wanted to run faster, to leap through the inferno, but it was impossible. The fire devoured everything. Walls, roof, memories, leaving only charred rubble behind. When the smoke cleared, there was no sign of Ivie. Not beneath the collapsed roof, not among the ashes. Only a scorched bracelet, twisted and blackened by the heat, remained. Oyomi sank to the ground, the weight of despair pressing on him. Night became unbearable. He dreamt of her, calling his name. Every sound, every shadow reminded him of her, beckoning him into shadows he could not reach. Weeks passed. Oyomi could not eat, could not sleep. Every sound, every shadow reminded him of her. Friends offered comfort, yet their words fell hollow. He kept returning to the charred remains of his home, trying to understand how the fire had consumed everything without a single sound. Why hadn't he heard anything when the house burned? He asked himself repeatedly, though he hadn't been home when it started. The thought nagged at him, unresolved, a question that refused to leave his mind. Finally, he had to leave Enkay. A family burial in Agbado gave him reason to travel. The town buzzed with mourners, and he moved among them mechanically, greeting relatives he barely recognized. Then, in a blink, a moment that felt both impossible and real, he saw her. Ivie, alive. She was opening the door of a car, laughing lightly at something the man behind her had said. Her hand rested on his shoulder as she stepped in. It was a flash, a single instant, staring into Oyomi's memory. His heart froze. Questions crashed into his mind. How had she survived? Who was this man? Why had she vanished that day? It was coincidence, or perhaps fate, that brought him here. Ivie had survived, but the misery of her disappearance remained unresolved. Oyomi's grief turned to shock, confusion, and longing. The fire had taken his home, but not the journey that awaited them. After seeing Ivie in Agbado, Oyomi returned to Enkay, but the world felt hollow. The ruins of their home stood blackened and silent, each scorched wall a reminder of loss. Nights were the hardest. He lay awake, wondering how the fire had consumed everything, without a sound of her. Days blurred, meals went untouched. Words from friends and family bounced off him like echoes in an empty house. He revisited the riverside, the narrow streets they had walked, and the tree where they once carved their names. Each place whispered memories but offered no answers. Still, A faint ember of curiosity lingered. Something didn't sit right. The fire, her disappearance, the absolute silence. He could not stop thinking. Was it really an accident? Or was there something I don't yet understand? Oyomi realized that grief alone would not bring him clarity. The questions gnawed at him relentlessly, planting the first seed of a journey he had not yet dared to take. Weeks later, grief began to fuel action. He walked the streets of Ikare, revisiting familiar places, asking discreet questions of neighbors and shopkeepers. A few mentioned the woman who matched Ivie's description in Agbado, but details were scarce and cryptic. Every observation became a puzzle piece. He noticed patterns, the streets she favored, the people she spoke with, small habits that lingered in whispers. The glimpses he had seen in Agbado haunted him. He had to find her again to understand why she had vanished. Oyomi's curiosity turned into determination. He realized that Ivie's life had moved on, but he could still follow the thread. The hunt was no longer passive. It had begun in earnest, each clue a step closer to confronting the hidden truths of her survivor. Oyomi returned to Agbado with a mission. Every street seemed alive with secrets. He walked slowly, observing, asking discreet questions, and trying not to appear out of place. Some neighbors mentioned seeing a woman who matched Ivie's description months ago, moving with a certain elegance. Her laughter bright and distant. No one knew her story, only that she had appeared suddenly and then vanished again. Oyomi's heart raced with each sighting. He noticed small gestures, subtle habits, and the faint possibility of her presence around the street. He now watched like a hawk. Every movement was a clue, every whisper a thread leading somewhere he could not yet grasp. And then a glimpse. A familiar hand adjusting her dress. A posture he knew too well. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to freeze, but she disappeared before he could be sure. Frustration and longing collided. She is here somewhere. I have to find her. Oyomi followed patterns carefully, watching streets, observing crowds, noting who she interacted with. Questions multiplied. Who was she spending time with? Where was she going? Every answer seemed to push him closer to a truth he wasn't yet ready to confront. By the end of the day, Oyomi realized Ivie's life had moved forward, but he was now on the path to uncovering it. One careful observation at a time. The hunt had begun in earnest. Oyomi followed every subtle clue along the streets of Agbado, his eyes scanning every passerby, his heart beating faster with each step. The town thrummed with evening life, vendors calling out, children chasing one another, the hum of cars. But his focus was entirely on one possibility, Ivie. And then he saw him, the man who had appeared in fleeting glimpses before. Strong, confident, and familiar with the world in a way that made Oyomi ache. And Ivie, she was there too. Her delicate hand resting lightly on the man's arm. Her laughter rang clear, effortless, and it pierced Oyomi's chest like a blade. Every sacrifice he had made, every tear he had shed, felt suddenly small, almost meaningless. Jealousy surged hot and sharp. But beneath it was a deeper question. Who is he? Why her with him? Oyomi watched silently, taking in the small, intimate gesture, the way the man guided her through the crowd, the gentle touch on her shoulder, the ease between them. Each movement screamed a life Oyomi had been excluded from. Questions tumbled in his mind. Why had she left? What had truly driven her disappearance? Every answer seemed just out of reach. Teasing him, intensifying the obsession that had been growing for weeks. He wanted to approach, to demand answers, to confront them, but he stayed hidden. Patience was crucial. He had learned that rushing forward could destroy the chance to understand the full story. Night fell, and Oyomi returned to his lodgings, replaying every gesture and glance over and over. The rival was not just a man. He was a symbol of everything Oyomi had lost, everything he had sacrificed, and the reality that Ivie's life had continued without him. And yet, even in the pain, a spark of resolve flickered after witnessing Ivie with the man on the street of Agbado. Oyomi knew he could no longer rely on chance. He needed answers, but he also needed caution. Every step in the bustling town felt like navigating a web of secrets. One wrong move could shatter the fragile thread connecting him to the truth. He began asking discreet questions. Shopkeepers remembered the woman, graceful, radiant, and distant at the same time. Neighbors recalled seeing her arrive suddenly months ago, but none knew her story. Only fragments reached him. Whispered hints that she had survived the fire, that she had left Ikare with purpose. Oyomi pieced together patterns from these fragments. Streets she frequented, corners she lingered on, the few people she interacted with. Everything formed a subtle map of a life he had no right to enter, but could not ignore. Then, at dusk, he saw her again, Ivie laughing softly beside the man, moving through Agbado with the ease of someone who had built a new world. The sight struck him with a mixture of relief, longing, and unbearable heartbreak. Yet this time, he restrained himself. He had learned that approaching her without understanding could ruin any chance of uncovering the truth. Patience and observation became his tools. He replayed every gesture, every glance, every subtle movement, searching for clues about why she had vanished, how she had survived, and what her new life entailed. The more he observed, the more he realized that Ivie's disappearance had been deliberate. It was not a mistake, not a random act of fate. There was purpose behind every step she had taken, every person she had involved. Night fell, and Oyomi returned to his lodgings. Heart heavy with resolute, he understood now that confronting the past required more than anger or grief. It required clarity, courage, and strategy. He would uncover the secrets of Ivie's hidden life, no matter how painful, and face them head on. Days of careful observation finally needed a break. Oyomi noticed subtle interactions that revealed more than words ever could. The man with Ivie wasn't just a companion. He seemed protective, attentive, and in possession of something Oyomi couldn't yet rename. Every gesture, every glance between them carried meaning. Then an old acquaintance of Ivie's appeared in Agbado. Hesitant at first, she eventually approached Oyomi, lowering her voice. She survived the fire. It wasn't an accident, she whispered. She left Ikare because she needed to escape. But you should know, she is with someone now. Oyomi's heart pounded. Relief mixed with a painful ache, but the details remained veiled. Why had she truly left? Why choose another man after everything they had shared? The questions formed a storm in his mind. Determined, Oyomi followed carefully, tracing her routines. Without being noticed, that evening, a revelation came unexpectedly. A street vendor mentioned seeing Ivie visit a small residence on the outskirts of Agbado. Arriving quietly, leaving quickly, Oyomi memorized the details. She had created a life apart, healing from him but not careless. Every choice, every step was deliberate. Alone later, Oyomi replayed every memory of her, every detail of their life in Ikare. The fire, the disappearance, the sudden life she had built. It all began to make sense. But the deeper truth, the one he needed to face, remained just out of reach. Oyomi had followed the trail long enough to know it would lead to one inevitable moment. On a quiet street in Agbado, just as the sun began to dip behind distant rooftops, he saw her again, Ivie, standing by the gate of a modest compound. Her posture was relaxed, Yet, something in the way she paused suggested awareness, a life carefully measured. He approached cautiously, his heart hammering. Every step felt like a drumbeat in his chest. Ivie, he called softly, careful not to startle her. She turned, eyes widening for the briefest instant before settling into a neutral expression. The man beside her gave a polite nod but said nothing, stepping back slightly as if sensing the tension. The air was thick with unspoken words. Oyomi's gaze searched hers for any sign of the woman he had loved. The woman who had vanished into fire and shadows. Why? Why did you disappear? He asked finally, his voice trembling. Ivie's eyes flickered. Unreadable. She took a deep breath, then simply said, it's complicated. That single answer, both evasive and loaded, ignited a storm of emotions in Oyomi's relief, anger, grief, and longing, all colliding. He studied her, noticing the subtle changes, her composure, the quiet strength in her movement, and the faint glow of new life, something Oyomi couldn't name, but instinctively understood. She had survived. Yes, but she had also moved forward in a world without him. The man beside her, the rival, remained silent yet present, a constant reminder of the distance Oyomi now faced. Each second stretched unbearably as Oyomi tried to reconcile the woman he loved with the life she had built apart. Finally, Oyomi swallowed, forcing himself to stay composed. I needed to know that you are alive, he admitted. His words were simple, yet carried a weight that hung between them. Ivie said nothing, only letting him speak, her silence a complex answer in itself. As he stepped back, the realization settled in. Confrontation didn't mean resolution. It meant facing the truth gradually, piece by piece. Tonight, he had seen her, spoken to her, and understood a little more. An unexpected encounter gave him the breakthrough. A local acquaintance, noticing his persistence, whispered the truth. If he had found comfort and stability with another man, he provided her needs, supported her, offered a life she had chosen freely. Yet, there was no malice in her choice, just survival and a desire to live. Oyomi's heart ached with the weight of understanding. The woman he had loved with all his heart had made choices he could never control. The rival was not just a man, he was a part of Ivie's carefully reconstructed world, one Oyomi could not enter. But the revelation also brought clarity. Oyomi realized that Ivie had never been truly in love with him. Though she had valued his devotion, she had stayed with him, appreciated his sacrifices, but her heart had never belonged fully to him. That truth, once unbearable, now illuminated his path forward. Oyomi returned to Ikare, walking through the streets where memories clung to every corner. The charred remains of his old home were gone now, replaced by open spaces where the sun shone freely. He felt the weight of the past lift slightly, as if the ashes of grief had begun to nourish something new inside him. He thought of Ivie, the woman he had loved with all his heart. She had survived the fire, rebuilt her life, and found someone who gave her what she needed. The truth had been painful, yet it carried a strange clarity. She had never truly loved him, and yet, in his heart, he understood her choices. When Oyomi finally saw her again, it was brief. She greeted him with a polite, warm smile, and he nodded. No words were needed. There was no need to rekindle what had been lost. In that moment, forgiveness filled him, not just for Ivie, but for himself. He had loved deeply, and that love had shaped him into the man he was today. Ivie continued her life with her new husband, sharing laughter and comfort, unaware that Oyomi had found peace. The rival remained by her side, But Oyomi no longer felt jealousy. He had faced the truth, embraced it and let it go. Walking through the quiet streets of Ikare, Oyomi felt the release of a burden he had carried for too long. The fire had taken his home, but it could not take his capacity to forgive, to grow, and to move forward. He realized that some stories do not end with claiming what was lost. Some stories end with understanding, acceptance, and the quiet strength to start anew. Oyomi smiled softly, the horizon glowing with possibility. And so the tale of Oyomi and Ivie closed, not with heartbreak alone, but with the power of forgiveness, resilience, and the courage to continue living fully no matter the scars of the past.